Welcome to Unhidden Voices, family. This is episode number 6. This is a really wonderful episode because I got a chance to talk to my cousin, Matin Abdel-Qawi. He is the principal of Oakland High School. He's been an educator in the Bay Area for over 2.5 decades. Yeah, he's an old man, and he is also a big brother. So all my kids call him uncle, and rightfully so, because he's just wise. He's very wise, and he's sharing a lot of knowledge um, that's really important about what it means to be an educator, what it means to provide resources in schools for African American children and students, and what communities need to do to galvanize around that, and what we need to do in terms of abolishing the police. Like he drops a lot of knowledge in this episode, and he absolutely wins the award for best answer to the question, how would you describe our family? So check it out. Welcome, listen, learn, and amplify with us.
So I went to Cal for 2 years, and somewhere during those 2 years, I was offered an assistant principal's job at Castlemont.
Yeah.
So I left Claremont, went to Castlemont, and I was on that campus for 10 years. A couple of years as an assistant principal for Castlemont, and then the schools broke down to small schools. I became a principal of one of the small schools, East Oakland School of the Arts. Stayed there for 10 years, and then for a lot of different reasons, they wanted to close the small schools and put it back to one comprehensive campus. I said, well, that's not in the best interest of the students. That's not in the best interest of the community, the staff, or anything. You're going backwards for financial reasons. And we started to have some really good gains in academic achievement, like kids who would normally fall through the cracks at Castlemont would come to school, staying in class, and being successful. Like the number of African American and Latino brothers and sisters graduating from high school and going to four-year universities was higher than it had been in like the 10 years prior to that. So we had a ton of success, but for a lot of political and financial reasons, they wanted to put the schools back together and have one large comprehensive school. I said, I'm all good, I left. At the same time, they started the Office of African American Male Achievement, and the superintendent at the time asked me to help run that department with a brother who was the executive director. So I became a director at AAMA and did that for 2 years. But was definitely missing being on school campus. Like it was great work. We did some amazing things to support the academic achievement of African American males in the district. So once in a lifetime opportunity, and the work that they continue to do became a model for the country and actually other countries as well. And to this day, they are seen as the leaders in developing curriculum and professional development and programs for African American male students. But like I said, I got tired of being away from the school campus. That's where I figured I thrived, where my skills were best utilized. Yeah. And so I applied for and was offered the job to be the principal of Oakland High School. And bring you up to date. I just finished my 7th year there, and looking forward to going into my 8th year next year, inshallah.
Well, the specific question is, you were talking about your schooling experience, and I think it's really unique because not only did you go through school, but then you also help other people go through school. And you talked a little bit about, specifically focusing on African American males, but can you talk about like what in your experience made you even want to do that? Being an African American male, did you feel like you were targeted or discriminated against when you were in school? Or did you notice that for some of your students?
So I was fortunate that when I grew up and went to school, particularly high school, but I was all in Plainfield, New Jersey. And this, during those times in the 70s and 80s, this was almost exclusively community of color. And so now I think also at that time, my awareness of issues of racism and discrimination weren't as defined, and my awareness wasn't as acute as it became later on in life. So I had a really blessed opportunity. My dad owned his own barbershop for almost 50 years. His clientele was 100% African American. His co-workers, people he hired, were all African American. The mailman was African American. He brought his supplies and materials from African Americans. Like, that's how my dad got down, and that was kind of like my world that I lived in. And so I was really fortunate that way. But to actually answer your question regarding as an educator, like the system is not designed to educate Black and brown kids at all. It's designed, like the results we get in our public educational system is the results it's designed to get. You know, the resources that are required to educate all people aren't equitably distributed to all communities. And so, you know, working in Oakland, you rely on a lot of goodwill and energy and a lot of people who care deeply about kids, as opposed to, you know, having all the resources that matches so that you can really provide the level of education that's at the level that our young people need. But as a principal of East Oakland School of the Arts, I was in my, I think, second year of being a principal, and just realized just how deeply difficult it was to get particular African-American male students to be successful in school. You know, 80% of the teachers were white female. Like, the number of African-American male candidates that I've interviewed for teaching positions in my almost 20 years as an administrator is probably in the area of like 20 or 25. But I've probably interviewed 500, close to 600 people for positions expanding my career. It's just very rare to even have the opportunity to interview an African-American for a position, let alone an African-American male. Probably interviewed less than 10, again, in over 20 years and hundreds of positions and hundreds of interviews. It's just really difficult. But either way, as a principal of East Oakland School of the Arts in the second year, I wrote a letter, and this is before internet was popular. This is before any of these social media apps were happening. I just wrote an email and sent it to maybe 20 people. And pretty much the email said, I'm an African-American male principal of a school in deep East Oakland, and I'm really struggling with how to just figure out how to help our African-American males become successful in school. And I sent it to 20 or so people. And I guess what happened to that letter would be considered what they consider today going viral. It got sent to hundreds and probably close to 1,000 people all over the city, the state, and even the country. And actually even went to people in other countries. And because I put my cell phone number on there and got calls from people from all over the world, all over the country, educators, non-educators, people who work in or operate community-based organizations, say, what can we do to help? I'm here, like, what do you want? Like Delroy Lindow called me on my cell phone, like the famous actor who lives in San Francisco, called me on my cell phone and said, you know who this is? I said, no, I don't. I'm Delroy Lindow. I said, oh no, wow, that's exciting.
For everybody who does not know, Delroy Lindow is in a show on Netflix right now. It's a new film done by Spike Lee, and I think it's called The Five Bloods or something like that. It's excellent. Have you seen it yet?
Yeah, we saw. Me and the boys watched it last night.
He deserves it. If he doesn't win an award for that movie, that was great. But anyway, that's the sidebar. Just just a little plug.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt, it was a good movie, bro. So he called and said, "Hey, what can I do to help? I got your letter." And so what was recommended is that I hold a convening to bring people to Castlemont's campus to figure out what we can do to address this issue. And I said, cool. So I sent another letter out, say, hey, this is the thing I'm going to do. I'm going to hold a convening at the campus in about 2 weeks on such and such a day. Probably close to 200, 225 people showed up for this meeting, for this convening. Blown away. Again, this is all before internet, social media, and that kind of stuff. This is all word of mouth, people telling other people. And people showed up in rows, really offering all types of support. People say, hey, just fill out this form and we'll give you $10,000, $15,000, $20,000. We probably raised, just that night alone, like close to $100,000 to purchase resources, hire staff, to help support us in creating systems in our school to help African-American male students. So I don't know if that answered your question, but it was a eye-opening experience to the amount of love and dedication that there are in our communities to support our brothers and sisters to be successful in school. It also highlighted just how inadequate public schools are set up to support our young people.
Right.
And in the absence of efforts like this, it's going to be very, very difficult for all of our African American male and female students to be successful. I think even now, African American women outpace all other ethnicities and genders in college going rates, and they far exceed African American male students. Yeah. And not that going to college is the solution for all, but we can't even get it. We struggle with even creating the systems to help them at least be eligible to go to college at the conclusion of high school.
So I want to kind of dive a little bit deeper into some things that you're talking about, specifically around, because I feel like we're in a time where the focus is on amplifying Black voices and specifically talking about like the experiences of African Americans, and you're talking specifically about African American males. I'm wondering what the response was in terms of the teachers and the folks on your campus when you're reaching outside of the campus for that. And you're also specifically talking about African American males, and was there pushback with like, why not talk about other groups, or, you know, African American females or Latinos or whoever else was on your campus? And also, did teachers, you said predominantly white, there was predominantly white teachers, did they feel like, oh, you know, we're getting this welcome support from community members, or was it kind of like, this is saying that we're inept in some kind of way?
So everybody saw the need. There was it wasn't a secret. Like, every teacher was struggling. Every counselor realized it was an issue. Everybody was begging and looking for support, but it looks different, you know, from person to person. The call was well received by everyone. Like, no one on my campus at that time, again, this was a small school, felt like this was an intrusion or an indictment of their skills or their commitment or their dedication. There was no pushback. It was well received and fully supported. And even at night, like, half the staff were there to help do the sign in and help greet people and pass out, you know, food and what have you. They knew this was a great opportunity for them, because they sincerely believed that, you know, all our kids could be successful. Like, they had everything that a person needs to be successful. They were born with it. They had it. They had it all. They just required a lot of assistance and a lot of support to bring it out and to sharpen those skills and get them ready to read, write, and do math and what have you at the level where you could be successful in college. Mm-hmm. And so they welcomed the support. There was no pushback at all. That was the latter part of your question. Maybe you can rephrase the first part of it.
So I guess the first part is, and maybe let me rephrase it and bring it to the current, in terms of the current call to focus on, you know, Black lives, right? And it seems like this is what you're talking about, is that something that you were doing, you know, a decade ago. And when we say Black lives, we're going to focus on that. There's a pushback of all lives. So I was wondering, like, when you said Black boys or African American males, was there a pushback, like, why are we focusing on African American males?
Yeah. So no, again, these terms weren't used then, but they were allies. Like, these were predominantly white folks who were, some of them are some of my best friends now. They're principals in the school district now. At least one of them is, and others hold different positions in the district. These are people who I was able to identify through the interview process and getting to know them in their early years of teaching, supporting and coaching them to become the best teachers they could become. I knew where their hearts were. Like, I knew where their minds were. I knew what their social justice agenda was. And so that's why that's why I hired them. That's why I brought them on staff with me. Those skills are far more valuable than what university you went to, and in many ways, like, what instructional strategies are your go-to instructional strategy. Like, when I participate in interview panels, like, I listen to those questions. I may even ask them sometimes, but those aren't the most important questions. I need to know how you feel about Black and brown folks. I need to know what you think when you see Black and brown folks. I need to know what is your experience in engaging Black and brown folks. all those other stuff, I let the other people ask because those are important to them. But these are the skill sets that make you a qualified and successful educator of Black and brown kids.
Yeah.
But they were definitely allies in the work. And even when I go on a protest now, I was on one with your son yesterday and have been on probably a half dozen or so over the last couple of weeks, ever since the assassination of George Floyd. And I see my staff out there all the time. I mean, this is something that, although these are the original allies in terms of educating Black folks.
Yeah.
And given that 80% of the teaching staff, particularly in our communities, are white women, like, you got to be really good at identifying which ones come at this work with the right focus and mentality. Mm-hmm. And you can quickly identify those who are, have that mission mentality where, I want to save the Black kids, I want to save these poor kids. And often they don't end up being really successful teachers. They develop good relationships, but I need someone that's going to be in the classroom that's going to help my kids get the skills they need to be successful.
Can you talk about how you are able to identify that? Like, how are you able to identify the mission mentality? And can you speak a little bit more to what that is? Because I don't think a lot of people even know that they have it.
Sure. No, a lot of them don't know. And if I identify during the interview process, they may never find out from me, at least. I ain't gonna hire them. But what you look for is, what did you do prior to wanting to become a teacher? So when you were doing your undergrad study, when you were in high school, like, how did you spend your time and energy? What classes did you take? And why did you take those classes? So if you see white folks who take African-American studies, okay, let's talk a little bit. Why'd you do that? Like, what in your white world made you think taking an African-American studies class? Like, if I could opt out of any, European history class, I would have opted out of all of them, because I was like, what the hell has it got to do with me, right? But you didn't. Like, you went out of your way. You went through all the catalog, all the courses available at your university. That's the class I want to take.
Yeah.
Okay, that's an indication that you have a honest and sincere desire to learn about African American history and what have you.
Yes.
Actually, being an athlete is really important, because that's one of the areas in our society where you have to engage people of color. Yeah. Right. And so if you played basketball on your high school or college team, right? Talk to me about that. Who was on your team? Where did y'all play? Where, help me understand that. Athletes in general tend to have a different way of judging people. Yeah. And a lot of times, and this is not universal, but a lot of times athletes are more open to all people because they learned that through playing sports with people of other colors and cultures. Like, I just need the best player on my team. I don't care what color they are, right? Yeah. And then you end up developing relationships. So it's giving you an opportunity to engage folks. I think one of the things I get mindful of is when they actually will use terms like, I want to become a teacher in Oakland because I've always wanted to help the poor and oppressed people of society. Like, okay, why do you want to do that? Yeah. And if, where's that come from? Well, they need me. I've had so much privilege in life. So they, develop some term. I've had so much privilege. Like, I've learned to identify my white privilege, and I feel like this is my calling. This is what I need to do.
I've heard that.
And you have to unpack that. And sometimes it's not always comes from I don't think any of it ever comes from a bad place, but it definitely doesn't always come from a good place. A good place in terms of how's it going to benefit our young people. Yeah. Yeah. And so you need teachers who are just really, really sharp and organized. But and it's hard to always pick it up in a 45 or an hour interview. But the skill sets that you have to be an effective teacher of Black and brown kids, regardless of who you are, is a phenomenal set of skills that very, very few people have. Mm-hmm. And what tends to happen is, and this is happens with all cultures, having Black folks just as much as other folks, is, oh, well, their life is so hard, so I'm not going to push them so hard.
Yeah.
Oh, their family life is so challenging. It's going through so much. Oh, they're so poor. So I don't want to push them too hard because I'm not going to give them homework because they have so much going on. And like I said, that is the exact opposite of what our kids need. Even in this pandemic, even while we're closing schools, doing distant learning, like it pretty much destroyed our second semester of this last school year. And now we're planning for the fall of next year. It's going to have a similar take to it. And there's a group of people out there that says, well, because things are so bad, I want to pass all my students, regardless if they ever got on a Zoom call, did a Google Classroom lesson or anything. Because it's a pandemic and the world is hard, I want to pass all. I get the argument. Mm-hmm. You're going to do that again in the fall, though? Like now you set a precedence by doing it in the spring. Don't do anything. Life is hard. This is a pandemic going on. Black lives matter, but Blacks doing homework doesn't matter. Blacks studying doesn't matter. And so I got a real big problem with that. I need my teachers to continue to push all kids, regardless, because the pandemic ain't gonna be around forever. And Black folks been going through hell since the beginning of time, since the beginning of our first, step into Virginia 400 something years ago, right? We've been going through hell the whole time.
Yeah.
And the one way that we've been able to get even a semblance of success in this society is through education. And most of it through public education. And if we continue to create and identify excuses for why we can't educate us and our young people, Black and brown kids, then Black lives are not going to matter as much as they could. Yeah. And so we need, and part of this whole movement, to really identify and destroy and abolish systems that destroy Black folks, the education system. We're gonna get rid of police departments, right? We're not gonna fix them. We're not gonna train folks up. We're gonna abolish police departments. We're gonna get rid of the guns, the weapons, the badges, the cars, the precincts, all that needs to go away. But in some ways, we need a similar movement in the public educational movement as well, to create the outcomes that our kids deserve.
Yeah. Well, I want to ask you a question though, because especially when we think about, let's go back to the pandemic thing, because I worry about the equity piece of, like, if we said, how do you address equity then? Because if you say, like, everybody has to do homework and some kids don't have a computer, or, like, you know what I mean? Like, how do you address those issues of, like, or that someone may be experiencing some trauma and you're trying to get them to, be on a Zoom, right? But their mom is in the hospital because, dying of COVID. Like, how do you address those things? Or how do you tell your teachers to do that?
Sure. And those are real, right? Those are real issues that families deal with. And you have to take it on a case-by-case basis. Mm-hmm. So we definitely have young people in our school who don't have the technology, whether it's a Chromebook or access to Wi-Fi to do their lessons and what have you, because of the technology divide. Schools are responsible for filling that gap. Yeah. And so we did, to the amount of resources we had, we gave every student who expressed a need a Chromebook that they can take home and keep for the whole semester and throughout the summer. And even at this point, the district has identified the resources to give, I think, every student who identified that they need a Chromebook, to give them an actual Chromebook. And I think a hotspot as well. I think they've raised enough money to purchase a Chromebook and a hotspot for every student who needs one. And all they have to do is say, I need it. And the district's going to give it to them, as long as they're a student in the Oakland Unified School District. So there are going to be extenuating circumstances that we as a community are responsible for addressing.
Yeah.
And so if students are struggling and need counseling, we should provide that so students can get the counseling that they need, so that they have what they need to get back engaged in school. Families that are struggling because of unemployment and don't have access to food. And then the school system, the city, the government, the resources around them are responsible for providing them with the food that they need. Paying bills, again, particularly during the pandemic, We should be identifying resources. So our more successful people in society should be contributing money, and they are, to organizations that can get into the hands of families to pay the PG&E bill, to buy groceries, to buy medication that they need because they lost their job during COVID. And so we have a deep responsibility to fill those gaps in times of need. And at the same time, we need to continue to push those same kids, those same families to stay engaged in school so that when this pandemic is over, you can take off and continue to stay engaged and be successful.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Because there's this dip, and if you don't have that consistency, like you said, they're going to come back in the fall, and then what's going to happen because you didn't have any expectations for them in the spring or in the summer. Yeah. That's real. Okay, so all right, you talked a little bit about this, and we've been talking around it, but I want to specifically ask you about racism and your experiences with that. So have you specifically experienced racism yourself, or because a lot of what you're talking about is racism against the students that you work with, but have you experienced it yourself? And if so, can you just share what that was like for you?
So if there is any racism, boss, I ain't experienced none. I saw that on TV at some point. It seemed funny in my mind when I was thinking about it, and I just said it just looks stupid. You can cut that part out. So racism, have I experienced racism? Mm-hmm. So I think the first time, I don't know if it was the first time, but it was definitely early on in my life. And I grew up in a predominantly Black community. Like almost my whole block street were all African-American, except for this older white family, a couple older white families across the street, and maybe one or two further down the block. And the two across the street were like in their 80s. Like they was really old folks, super sweet, nice folks, as far as I can tell. And another family down the street. And I can't recall how we got to this situation, but got into a, like kids do, got into a confrontation with this little white kid down the street. Maybe he was playing baseball or two-hand touch football in the street or something. He got his feelings hurt and we had a little scuffle or what have you. Later on that same day when I was hanging out on the street, this is, back during the time where kids hang out on the streets until the street lights come on and then, you run home and so you don't get in trouble. His older brother came after me, like, you had a fight with my little brother, what have you. And he actually had a chain and he chased me with a chain. Mm-hmm. And I ain't the fastest kid around, but he wasn't catching me. But what happened was when he was chasing me, I was trying to cut between two cars parked in the driveway. I tried to cut between the two cars parked in the driveway. And it slowed me up just enough for him to catch me. And the chain came down across my back as I was stumbling to get through between the two cars. Mm. Right around that same time, Roots came out. Alice Haley's movie about the history of his family from Africa through slavery and what have you. And so very, very aware of the atrocities that white folks have done to Black people historically. And also aware of the role of whipping that was used to punish Africans who were enslaved. Mm-hmm. So did this white dude whip me with a chain on my back because I was Black? Mm-hmm. Allah knows best. Yeah. Was this white dude a racist? I was probably 12 years old, so I have no idea he was racist. But to this day, I feel like he was a racist white dude who also saw roots with his family, walked away with an understanding of how to treat Black folks, and came after me with that chain like they came after Kunta Kinte and Roots. Wow. Oh my God. I think in general, other than being pulled over by the police, like every other Black man for driving while Black, happened when I was in college. It's happened to me in my early years when I was in California. And just being hella nervous then, and just remembering the foul excuses they used to pull me over.
Yeah.
You know, but also remembering the fear that I had every time I got pulled over as a young man growing up. And it's also the fear that I have for my sons, not so much for my daughter, because she's a feisty firecracker and probably wouldn't take no junk from no police officer. But also for my boys as well, because it's a horrible, horrible, frightening experience. And I think it's even more frightening for them because of their deep awareness of racism, of corruption in the police officers, white supremacy. Like, I'm glad Saeed is not driving now. And I'm glad Umar don't have a car now. So whenever we going, we hanging with me for the most part, which is good because I'm an old guy now and I got a gray beard and I got a decent car. So the chances of me getting pulled over is a whole lot less than it is for them, right? But I've been blessed. Like I know some horrific stories that many of my brothers have experienced. And outside of the dozen or so times I get pulled over and say, well, you fit the description. I probably heard that a half dozen times. You fit it. Like, how many 5'6" light-skinned Negroes, you know, do you really have a profile on that you're looking for? That's what, and even one time they showed me, this was in Atlantic City when I was working in the casino. He actually went and got the picture and showed it to me. I said, really? You do really think we all look alike, don't you? Like, it was, there's no resemblance at all. Like, it could have been like a picture of Dougie and like, yeah, you fit the description. I said, you idiot.
So I guess, well, just to say this, that every single person that I've talked to in our family thus far has had an instance, men and women, girls and boys. You know, I don't think they consider themselves boys and girls, but, you know, I'll say our young people have all had incidences. And that is the one thing that I am unpleasantly surprised by. Like, you know what I'm like, kind of even like, I wish that wasn't the result of these conversations. I wish that I wasn't learning this, you know, but I feel so like it's so important. And, you know, to a certain extent, it's like we want to protect them. But what also I'm learning from them is how much of a fight they have, you know, in them. And that's a fight that they got. And that's generational. That's been passed down, you know, through us, through our parents and through their parents to them. So they have a fearlessness that, you know, that I'm encouraged by and I'm inspired by. And one of the things that I, you know, kind of have gotten is because I also, you know, some of the things that you're talking about in terms of our, you know, the fear of like wanting to protect our children from just being anti-Blackness, discrimination, racism, the, you know, police violence, the unfairness, the system, all these things that we have not been able to protect them from, you know, but we have taught them and they have an awareness of like a commitment to fight it, you know? And so, so I'm being, I guess, strengthened by that because it's like I think the protection comes in the fight that we inspired them to have, I guess, if that makes sense, you know?
Yeah.
So, but I guess my question for you is about dealing with it. Like, how do you deal with it? Like, how do you deal with racism?
How do I deal with racism?
Yeah, like, how do you deal with it and still kind of persevere in life?
So I'm definitely a race conscious person. And I can't imagine there's a Black person in America who isn't. How they respond and react to it, I'm sure is very different from person to person. People who accept it and acknowledge it, people who resist it, people who deny that it exists. But it exists for all Black people in this country.
Yeah.
So when I just as like my awareness of this, I felt was pretty early. Like when I was a senior in high school, I had to give my college a writing sample of so they could determine what class I should go to. And I wrote a paper, and again, just completely, this was on top of mind. They didn't tell me what topic. Just give us an essay so we can evaluate your writing. The title of my essay is "Why I Hate White Folks." That was the title of my paper. And I think it was informed by having seen Roots, a few years prior to that. But I really didn't engage white folks going on. I didn't live in that type of community. Like everybody, like my school was probably like 90% people of color. I think there was 3 white kids in the school. I just didn't have those type of interactions, but I was fully aware of it. And I knew there was something, and I think where I experienced it most was when I went to Wanda's graduation at the same university I graduated from, Stockton. I think she graduated in '84, so I was a senior then. And just was being on her campus. This is my first real experience of being around white folks. Like these, is as if I don't exist, as if we don't all exist, as if we're not seen, as if we're invisible. And the way I experienced that, and I still experience this to this day as a 53-year-old man, like white folks can be in a space and we could be in the same space, and they engage us or don't engage us as if as if we're invisible. Like where they will stand, where they will walk, how they will, like if I'm having a conversation with you, and how they would come and talk to you as if I wasn't even standing there.
Yeah.
Like their social cues or their social engagements are, and this is going to sound like a huge broad stroke. It's just so anti. I ain't gonna say it's racist, and Allah knows best, but it's definitely not consistent with how Black folks engage each other.
Yeah.
Like I feel like in those settings, and Anissa and I had this conversation recently. We were and this is during the pandemic. And one of the things Allah's blessed me to be able to do is the master will give me send me a text, say there's a family who needs food. I said, cool, this is an opportunity to get some blessings. I need as many blessings as I can get. So me and one or two, or some combination of me and my kids will head to the grocery store and get it. And one family is really particular, like, I need you to go to, it's not Whole Foods, what's the other?
Berkeley Bowl? Trader Joe's.
Trader Joe's, that's the other elitist supermarket. so she's like, go to Trader Joe's. So cool, we wait in line for half hour, got a mask on, and we get in there. And to this day, and I'm an old man now, like I've been around for a while. To this day, I still feel a level of discomfort in some of those places because I feel like the white folks in those spaces feel like I don't belong there. And so sometimes I'm like, F you, white folks, but sometimes it's a nagging pressure on the back of my neck, like as if I've invaded their space, even in Oakland. Yeah. Even in Oakland. And so those are some of my internal issues with race and how I engage and deal with white folks. And sometimes I put it to the side because I'm like, look, you guys are just you. And I don't have enough energy to help fix your issues. Like I need to just focus on me and my family. I forget your question. I don't want to.
I said, how do you deal with it and keep going and talking about it? But I feel like part of what you're talking about too is what's behind it is that you put it into your work. That's how you really deal with it, because you address it in like the ways in which you have the power to control the situation, like your hiring practices and the importance of supporting and focusing on bringing in resources for Black children and brown children. And that is how you what I'm learning from you in terms of like a positive way to address it is like through what you can control, because you can't control like how somebody might make you feel when you go into a grocery store.
Yeah, I appreciate that analysis, and I agree. Throughout my career, and I've been in the school district for I think 26 years now, something like that, and that's always been really important to me. And I haven't talked about all the different ways, but those are definitely some of the ways that some of the things I shared earlier are to address inequities as a result of Black folks. And I think what's most important is just to make sure my children are fully aware and capable. I think that's by far more important than anything. Like, come at me as much as you want.
Yeah.
But my job is to make sure my children are in a position to understand it, recognize it, to be strong in who they are, confident in who they are, to develop enough skills so that they can be as independent as possible, so they don't have to rely on others, to really value Blackness, to understand the role of Blackness. And in our situation, as my kids at school would say, because you light-skinned it, Mr. Abdul. And because we're light-skinned, like, we understand like the level of racism that because of how we look, it may not be as the same racism as how many of our family members look because of how they look. Like, they want to experience, they have the potential to experience racism against Black folks at a level different than us. In some ways, it's going to be the same because we Negroes, right? That's the commonality. But we also understand that there's also levels of it regarding who you are and how dark your skin is and how Afrocentric your features are as well. And we're mindful of that. And I think it creates an opportunity for us to step in and step up in a way that, you know, might be easier than other folks. And that's that's a whole nother realm of racism and shadeism, I guess it's called. I'm sure there's a word for it.
Colorism. I was talking to Randy about it yesterday. It's colorism.
Yeah. So, but we value that, and we was like, cool. So if there's a way that we can, like, even doing some of these marches that we go on, like, especially if I'm just with my boys, we know that we may be in a position to intervene, support, protect, help in a way that other folks can't. So a lot of times when we're marching, we're looking to see if there's other Black folks who are being, you know, like, attacked in ways that maybe they went past us because of how we look to get at someone else. And although it hasn't happened during any of these marches, we're mindful of it and ready to respond if the opportunity presents itself.
I think that's a beautiful segue to the last set of questions, which is about family. So the first question is about memory. So I want you to share a memory, a family memory with us that stands out for you, and explain why.
Any family memory? Wow.
Any memory.
A family memory. I should have read your questions in advance and taken some notes. Family memory. Wow. I think, and it's not it's somewhat specific. So yesterday, we were going to, the memory is not from yesterday. I could actually go. I'm not that old. You didn't say how long ago. So after the march we went on yesterday with Sadiq, Umar, and Syed, we had to walk back to my car. And so the four of us got in my car. And Sadiq said, "What's up with the GMC? Like, where's the GMC?" I said, "Oh man, that died." And he would just put on like, "Man, that car's like family." Because he has so many memories of that car. Like, I remember going on road trips in that truck and doing so much in that truck is a big part of our childhood. And then they were all just reminiscing about some of the things that we had done in the truck. And one of the things I remember clearly, and I don't know if Sadiq was there, but for sure my three kids were there, Fatima, Zainab, and there were more. It must have been your kids as well. This is when you guys were living in Oakland. I managed to put 8 bicycles on my truck. Wow. And so I had 8 of us in the car, 7-seater, put 8 of us in the car, and I was able to get 8 bikes. So we had bikes stacked up on top of the truck, and I also had a bike rack on the back. And this is hella bikes on this truck to take us to the park so we could spend the day at the park riding bikes. It's just me and 8 of our young family members. And it was hella fun. Like, I can see people looking at us, taking all these bikes off the top of the truck, one at a time, getting all the bikes, everyone putting on helmets. So we got 8 helmets, we got 8 bikes, we got snacks for 8. Like it's a sight. And it's only one adult. And I think the oldest was probably Umar, and he might've been like 14 at the time. Wow. At best he was 14, something like that. So, you can imagine the ages of everyone else. Yeah. And it was just like those days, those times that when they were young, and we spent a lot of time together, are some of the best memories I have ever. Yeah. And that's just one of them. That's just one. And I could talk about Yosemite trips that were just off the chain, fun, crazy, nerve-wracking, and just getting to know each other in ways, when you travel with someone and stay with someone, you're like, okay, me and they can't plan this trip no more. We're revoking her travel agency certificate. And just those years when our children were young, I think, like, if I could go back to those years, I would go back. Like, there's no other part in my life I would want to go back to other than when our kids were young, and we were obviously younger as well, and they spent time together getting to know each other. And I think those relationships are, as a result of the efforts that we did, Sundiata, you, me, our spouses, Brenda, just living in California, made it the right decision. Made it the right to move here, made it the right decision. And I feel just, and I know this is not part of your question, but in thinking about this interview, I always reflect on how blessed I am to have spent half my life in Jersey and able to get to know Carmen and Doug and Shelly and Pooh when she was younger, grow up half my life with them, and then spend the second half of my life here in California with the Cali family. So I got a deep relationships with both sides in ways that I feel blessed. Like it just really, not part of your question though. I wanted to share.
No. That's beautiful. It really, really is. All right. So how would you then, since you have had this deep connection, how would you describe the family? Like, how would you describe it to other people?
Our family?
Yes.
So I'll start off by describing what it's like to describe to my own children the family tree. And so when I talk about my mom, Aunt Brenda, Aunt Carmen, Uncle Bobby, and Aunt Barbara, and how they are related and how they're not related, it blows their minds. And I've been telling this since they were little kids. And till this day, they said, Dad, it's just too confusing. Like, so who has the same mom? And who has the same dad? And who's this and who's that? And for me, it's like, it's second nature. Like, this is just who we are. This, and so how I describe our family, we have some geniuses in our family. And we got some unbelievable geniuses. And I include you, Sundiata, Aunt Brenda, to be intellectual geniuses. Like the level of academic success that you three particularly have achieved and articulate and own and demonstrate is phenomenal. Your brother, he's probably one of the smartest people in the world. And had he done things differently at some point of his life, the world would know that. And the world may still get to know that. Like his leadership in the Muslim community and in the Black community in the Bay Area has skyrocketed to a level that I don't think, no one knew. Like, he is unbelievable. I didn't realize, and this is, so part of the challenge of moving to California is that, like, I was really close with Doug and Shelly growing up, but then I moved away. So when they became adults and spouse, got married and started their families, I was here. So I wasn't able to witness that. But the few glimpses I get into Doug is also a genius. Like, although he may not have gone to college, like, that man has an unbelievable understanding of the world and like, he sees things in ways. And so when I'm in Doug's company,
Yeah.
he's my little cousin. Actually, all y'all my little cousin.
Yeah, that's true.
Except for Shelly. Like I can just sit back and listen to Doug talk.
Yeah.
One, he has an amazing voice, so that's one thing. But like he just has a deep understanding of the world around him, and Allah's blessed him with career success. Like I look at Shelly, like, and your mom again, like your mom's going to register a number of times in my impressed scale. Like Shelly's is a grind, but Doug as well. Like Doug's worked 7 days a week since before I moved to California, at least early in my years of California. And he's been doing that the whole time.
Yeah.
I'm like, that level of resolve, that level of commitment to your family is phenomenal. And then when I go into his home, you see it. Like, I'm just so happy for him and his family. And I just wish I knew them better.
Yeah.
Particularly his kids. I'm so impressed with all of our kids, like particularly all of them, but the West Coast family, our kids are phenomenal. Yeah. Like the level of success that they're going to have, I'm so overwhelmed with it. Like I'm just enjoying the journey. I'm enjoying watching them grow, develop. We had a family thing at the house here some time ago, I think.
It was
I don't even know why we were getting together. And Asia is a beast in the loveliest of ways. Like she is so smart and blew me away. Like she only been in college for a semester. And you would think she had a PhD in political science when she sat at the kitchen table and wanted to debate me. And I'm just debating her because I wanted her to keep talking. I was just making up stuff to get argumentative about whether I cared about it or not, just so that she would defend it and go attack it. And I never do. Like I'm a quiet dude. I like to sit back and watch and observe. Yes. But Asia is phenomenal. And I just enjoy that a lot. Yeah. And so you asked me to describe my family. I don't know how to describe us. Like we're all over the place in terms of who we are. We got the most amazing children in the world. Delora, A.K. London, has had an unbelievable journey to where she is today. And she got out of prison a little over a year ago and has taken the Bay Area by storm. Like she is doing big things, fast, focused. Randy, that man is, I love him with all my heart. So I can go individually. I can't describe my family because ain't nothing about us the same. Like we're all over the place and we're all great in many ways and goofy in a lot of ways. And when we get together, it's the best. Like Wanda's talking about moving back. When Wanda was here, it was great because, you want your children to grow up with their aunties, right? That's the joy that I had in life. I had my aunties, my East Coast aunties, and now I got my West Coast auntie and uncle. And I hope Wanda does move back because I want her to still be connected to my kids and your kids and Sundia's kids as they continue to grow and develop. I don't know how to describe my family, Mina. That's my.
I think you did a phenomenal. Actually, you did. I'm impressed. I think you might have won the award for best family description.
All right. There's awards in this.
Well, I have to figure out what prize you get, but
you can't get Starbucks cars no more because they're racist.
Oh yeah, I heard, and they don't have oat milk, so
Crazy.
Okay, so who taught you to value family, and how did they teach you that?
Who taught me to value family? So I don't think growing up in my house, there were intentional conversations about the value of family. Mm-hmm. Actually, I think I learned, but we valued family, we hella valued family, but it wasn't explicit conversation like, all right, Matin, Dina, want to sit down, we're going to talk about the values of family. Like it wasn't like that. But there was always family around. My parents, we grew up in a house that had a big backyard, and every summer we had these huge parties with tons of, and you could see love and family in those spaces. Like whenever Aunt Carmen or Shelly You know, folks on the East Coast would talk about parties or family or gatherings. They'd always say Bellevue, because that was the address of the house we lived on. Was on Bellevue Avenue, and you know, it wasn't even the house. It was almost like an institution. It was a gathering place for folks, family and friends on the East Coast to just come hang out for occasions, you know, year long, over the course of the year, particularly in the summer though, when the weather is nice, we'd be in the backyard barbecuing, music, food, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I think value of family became instilled to me, one, when I became Muslim, and two, when I had my own family.
Yeah.
And I think those are the two things most important to me. If I never became an educator, fine. I'd have been happy sweeping, you know, cleaning toilets, picking up trash, whatever. Like the career is a distant thing in my things that I value most. But becoming a Muslim and having my own family and being in an area where we had a considerable amount of family.
Yeah.
I know we don't have a huge family, but we got a nice sized family here.
Yeah.
And just getting us together, I valued it because of how much I enjoyed it and benefited from it. And so did our children.
Yeah.
And so I think it was just our time together made me value it so much. And the same thing was on the East Coast. Like I got deep relationships with Hussein, the Goods, you know, Boo. Like I lived with Boo for a year. Like Boo took me in and treated me like her own, like with no questions asked. I was a student in college. I was dealing with some housing issues, and she, without question, without hesitation, and she would feed me like it was her job to feed me. Like she would make the salad for me every day. I hate salad. They had celery in it. Like celery was the worst taste, but Boo would make this small salad for me every day. Like the amount of love she showed me. Bunk, like just spending time on Bunk and Ray, the Goods, like that part of my life is all family. Like I wouldn't have the relationships with them. Like going to Gaffney, South Carolina, going to New Road in Pleasanton, New Jersey, where Carmen, Uncle Doug and them live. Like I could walk, you can blindfold me and I can get to their house in Gaffney, and I can get to their house in Pleasantville because of how much time we spent there.
Wow.
And yeah, like everything is family. And like, that's how it is today. Like me and my kids, and I think one of the things I don't have many regrets, but one of my biggest regrets is no longer being married to their mother, because I could have been a much better father if I was a much better husband. And I think Allah blessed me to have really good relationships with my children, but I had to work really, really hard to get it to where it's at. Yeah. And man, like it's nothing more important than my kids. Yeah. Like they are everything. Yeah. Like I live and die for them. Like so it's Allah, then Umar and Issa Syed, and then everybody else. Then the rest of humanity. You know, y'all falling somewhere else.
You're just saying Umar and Issa Syed in that order because that's how they were born, not because.
Oh, please, thank you for pointing that out. Yes. Thank you for making that. I don't want you to think, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right, so wait, so two last questions. All right, so this one is, who in the family has been your biggest teacher? And share something that they taught you that you will never forget.
My dad. My dad, easy, hands down, no question. And the thing that I learned from my dad was amazing, two things: an amazing work ethic and taking care of yourself physically. My dad owned a barbershop until he died, and owned it before I was born. So he had his own business for probably close to 50 years. And in the Black community, especially then, I don't know so much about now, like a barbershop was an important community center in the Black community back in the 70s and 80s, and obviously before that. But my dad had an unbelievable work ethic. Like he worked, he never took time off. Even when I became a teacher, I didn't take time off for like the first 5 years of teaching. And like, why you don't never take time off? Like, 'cause my dad didn't take time off. And someone pointed out to me, like, but your dad was self-employed. If he didn't take off, he didn't make money. I said, oh, you're right. I can take off and get paid. I think I took
That's right.
but man, and then like how responsible he was with money. Like he would have these envelopes in a box, almost like a shoe box, but each envelope had cash in it. And each envelope was for a bill. So each week when he, you know, it was a cash business, he would put money towards each bill in those envelopes. Wow. And then deposit it. Like his system was bizarre, but he would work 12-hour days on his feet, come home and be starving. And he wouldn't go straight to the dinner table. He would go to his office in the home and do his paperwork. And you can ask Dina and Wanda about paperwork, because he would do his paper. He would organize his money, his bills for the day, put his stuff in the safe, wash up, and then go have dinner. Wow. And he did that the entire career. Like I saw him do that when, you know, his health was failing him and he couldn't work.
Wow. So you also said he taught you to take care of yourself physically.
Yeah. And he did that too until he passed. So I remember, give me a second. So I would go home to my dad's house in his last years, but all the years, but definitely in the last couple of years. And I would be getting up for Fajr. So it'd usually be during the summertime. So Fajr, the Fajr morning prayer is super early. Like you got to get up at like 4:30, 4:45 in the morning to offer the morning prayer. And this is all the time, but even when he was ill or recovering from, you know, his brain surgery, I would, after my prayer, I'm like, what is that noise? Like, and so I'm looking around the house trying to identify, because he had like a 4-level house. It's a beautiful house. I'm like, where's that noise coming from? So I'm trying to follow the sound. And I look down in the basement and this man is on his stationary bike. The stationary bike was probably made in the 60s. So a rust bucket of bicycles, stationary bikes. But this man is recovering from brain surgery. It's like 5 o'clock in the morning and he's down there on this bike, putting it in. But it was always like that. So when I was in middle school, my dad would get me up in the morning. We would do calisthenics. For those who, you know, young people don't even know what calisthenics are. We do jumping jacks and push-ups and sit-ups. This was, I was in middle school. Then we would go out and run. And he would take me out running with him in the morning. And we would run up Bellevue, make a right on Woodland, go down to, I think it's South End Parkway. And he was much faster than me. So I would go, then he would come back. You good? Yeah, I'm good. Then, you know, I would get to my endpoint and turn around. And he would meet, then we'd go back to the house and stretch. This was when I was in middle school. Wow. And so early on, he instilled in me. And again, it wasn't, and this is the beauty of my parents, they led by example. They didn't do a whole lot of, you know, lecturing and talking. They lived a good life and they led by example. And the expectation was that we will follow in their footsteps. So yeah, both in terms of exercise and taking care of ourselves physically, eating healthy. Both my parents were healthy eaters, yeah. So those my dad by far was my first and probably most influential. Because to this day, like my kids and I were up at, our alarms went off at 4:30 this morning. We were out the house at 5. We were at the gym by 5:15, and we're shooting hoops and lifting weights for 2 hours this morning. And we've been doing that pretty much the whole pandemic. When Anisha was here, she went back to school now, but she would, every day at 6 o'clock, it's time to walk, Dad. And we would do this grueling 3-mile walk every day. And we would find other places in the Bay Area to walk. And we did that the whole pandemic. Walk, like 3-mile, 4-mile walks every day.
That's beautiful. Wow, that's beautiful. All right, last question is.
There's more?
This one more question. Okay, and what do you want everyone to know about what it means to be a part of a Black family in America?
I can't imagine anything more beautiful, more rewarding, more more fulfilling than being Black, period. Mm-hmm. And being in a Black family is a phenomenal gift to be able to go through life as. Given our history in this country, given how we're the descendants of Africans who were enslaved, given emancipation, Jim Crow, civil rights, systemic oppression, and we're still an amazing, loving, thriving, spiritual people who at the end of the day actually really look out and are kind-hearted people. And I think these times with the Black Lives Matter movement happening is highlighting how oppressed and systemically we've been wronged for the entire time.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know who makes Aunt Jemima syrup, but how them crackers just realized now that was hella racist.
Yeah.
Better late than never, I guess. But what the hell, man? Like, I appreciate how, every day you turn on the news, there's another thing. Like, we're gonna get rid of this. We're gonna stop doing that. Kaepernick is, we were wrong, Kaepernick. I guess it wasn't about the flag. Those crackers are really crazy out there. And that's why we got to be out there every day. And some of these marches are 15,000, some are just 1,000, but the size doesn't matter. It's the intent to take advantage of this time. And I saw Abdul Malik yesterday at the protest. And he was like, he reminded me, like, this is just the beginning of this decade. Like, this is just 2020. Like, yeah. I hope, and just remember, like, the Montgomery bus boycott lasted over a year. Like, This is a time for us. Like, this is a time to have systemic changes. And I know part of your questions, and we didn't dive into it deeply, is about police brutality and what have you. And this has got nothing to do with reform. Like, we can't professional development and train white supremacy. And it's not even about white supremacy when it comes to police, because it's the system of policing that's corrupt. So if you're Black, brown, white, it don't matter. Once you put that badge on and put that gun on your hip, you think you're invincible. And then you treat people like crap. And so we just need to get rid of policing as we know it, and create a system of social services that actually systemically and equitably take care of Black and brown nationwide.
Yeah, one of the things that I really am enjoying about talking to mom's generation is how they lived. There was a community, it was a community, policing. It's like, I'm gonna call your mama and before you get home and tell them what you did, right? Because so it was like the village was involved in taking care of itself, as opposed to, somebody coming out that doesn't live there, is not connected, and then they don't see you and they don't appreciate you. Well, I appreciate you, Matin. This has been, I'm so moved by everything you said, and it's just been a pleasure talking to you. I thank you so much.
Good luck. This was fun. I appreciate it.
All right. Love you.
Love you too, cuz.
Talk soon.
All right, assalamu alaikum.
She was just forming inside. She took her time to grow, and she was good to go. Soon as the wings were